Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing something. I was excited to get out of the house.
Yeah, you've been on tour, right?
I'm on a stand-up tour. I'm getting started tomorrow. I leave for Cincinnati, and that's where I've done a sprinkle of dates, and now it's full stop for the next probably 6 months.
And what was it like for you to not be on tour for a long time? Because even before the pandemic, you had kind of taken a bit of a breather, right? There have been times when you have stopped doing stand-up.
Yeah, I hadn't done stand-up for about 6 years. I didn't really feel like I had that much to say in that medium, and I wanted to wait until I had something of import to share. And so when I decided to go back to do another special, which was my most recent special for HBO Max, called Evolution, I had gone to therapy and gotten a whole basket of information about myself and my behavior and the way, the gift of self-awareness. I mean, it's the greatest exchange you can ever make, is paying somebody to tell you what your fucking problem is. And so I decided to turn that into my book, which was called Life Will Be the Death of Me, and out of that was born my stand-up tour and my stand-up special, and now we're turning it into a TV show.
But you've been reflecting on yourself for the duration of your career, right? You've written multiple books before. So at what point did you feel like you had reached a new level of self-awareness that it required reintroducing yourself to the public with a new book and a new...
Well, I think what I was doing, I wasn't necessarily self-reflecting. In the beginning of my career and during my Chelsea Lately days, I was just kind of telling people what I thought about them, and unsolicited advice, and kind of, just my perception of the world around me that I lived in, my perception of Hollywood and the idiots among us, my perception of what was wrong with everybody. So I think with therapy, I started to get back to myself and realize, okay, wait, this isn't really about other people. It's more to do with my own issues, my own childhood, what happened to me, blah, 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 blah. And to take a little bit more accountability for your behavior and who you've impacted in a deleterious way or in a positive way. And to take kind of stock of that, I think, is a natural evolution for somebody like me who makes a living out of sharing myself or oversharing, however you want to frame it. So I just thought, oh, this is something good to share,
right.
This is helpful. Not everybody can afford to go to the kind of psychiatrist I went to. Not everybody could absorb that information the way that I was willing.
Like secondhand therapy.
Yeah, a lot of things were born out of my therapy. I'm like, I can help the world now.
Right. I was telling you backstage, I got introduced to you from your first book, My Horizontal Life, a collection of one-night stands, and someone gave that to me, I think it was my mother, when I was 13, which was a questionable decision, but I was a big fan, and I watched your E! Show every night, and you were talking about, telling the idiots in Hollywood what was wrong with them and assessing other people at the beginning of your career. What woke has done a complete 180, where when I was watching your show, it was the antidote to all of the dumbass celebrity tabloid coverage that was 24/7 on E!, on Extra, in the tabloids. And you were sending it up, and it was considered, I think at the time, you tell me what your assessment is, like the woke, smart-seeming, correct liberal view to have, that these girls like Britney Spears, the other socialites, Paris Hilton, Nicole Richie, that they were bad for America, that their lives were about nothing, just about consumption and behaving badly, that they were famous for being famous. And you filleted them expertly. You were one of the best at it. And now you'd be canceled for saying most of the shit that you said then about those girls, who are women. I'd be canceled for calling them girls now. But what is it, I guess, what has that evolution been like in terms of understanding where the culture is shifting?
Well, I wouldn't say that they were bad for America. I think it's more of a reflection of America. That people the people that are famous are famous. We have it's a reflection of our society. So, But in terms of what you're asking me, yeah, of course, that show wouldn't work right now. Or maybe it would. Maybe everybody's so sick of this and so sick of cancel culture. I mean, that's all I hear from men is like, when is this going to be over? It's like, I bet you wish it was over. But unfortunately, there are too many people who can't accept that there has to be a pivot, that there has to be a shift, right? As a comedian, I take any challenge, you want to give me parameters and we're done making fun of this group of people and this group of people and this hurts these people, great. I can work on there's a whole group of things to make fun of that don't involve filleting someone, as you say. But yeah, that show was, right. I mean, it was very honest and very direct, and it was just like, what kind of silliness is this,
But it wasn't quite like that. I mean, you were coming for these women, and you were really brutal about them. And now you are actually who we're talking about when we say that there's a reckoning about the coverage of people like Britney Spears.
Is this what you're trying to do, cancel me during this interview?
No, but I'm curious, like, you've had this evolution personally that seems like it has gone on kind of at the same time that the culture has shifted. And I'm wondering, was it a case where you went to therapy and you had these realizations? Or did the culture start to shift and you have a moment where you're like, oh, fuck, people are not where I'm at?
No, I'm not
anymore.
like that. I'm not following anybody's lead on anything. I'm following my own lead. So, no, that happened after, actually. And it was, it may have been right before this whole, it was years ago. It was before the cancel culture and stuff that I started. But no, when you go into therapy and you unpack your emotional trauma, what happened to you as a child, whatever screwed you up, and you're really honest and you're there for the right reasons, which is getting to the truth of who you are, you're going to come out as a different person if you're serious, because it's not easy to go to a doctor's office and be vulnerable in front of a man that you don't know, when you're a woman like me who really is fierce about my own independence and not relying on any man to ever provide or do anything for me, because my story and my brother dying when I was a little girl and my father's retreat subsequent to my brother's death all scarred me about men. Men can't be trusted. Men, you have to do everything on your own if you're a woman. You have to be strong. You have to be fierce. For me to go repeatedly to a doctor's office and know that there was a good chance that I would be trying not to cry, isn't a fun thing to do. So if you are in the process of going to therapy, it is a commitment to yourself and an investment in yourself to get to the other side of who you are, right? You want to be your better self. You want to be more kinder, gentler. I was done with being so impatient and being so impulsive and kind of lacking empathy. I lacked empathy.
And what is the calculation before you start talking about that type of thing publicly? How does that make its way into your public persona and into your
There's not really a lot of calculation with what I do. I try to be very, very honest at all times, because whether you like me or hate me, I'm not lying. I'm never going to be fake or pretend that I'm something that I'm not. And so there was no calculation. It felt like the most natural thing for me to do was to share my story, because listen, therapy is also, you go into therapy thinking, you make some strides. It's like 4 steps forward and then 2 steps back. I mean, I once went into therapy and I meditated with my psychiatrist, whose name is Dan, for the first time that I really felt what people talk about when they talk about meditation, which before I was like, oh, that's a bucket of people that I don't want anything to do with. Retreats, meditation, journeys, the universe, everybody can go fuck themselves. But finally, I sat with him and I felt like we meditated, and I remember coming out, I'm like, oh my God, I'm learning so quick. Like, I'm a quick study. I'm gonna nail this whole therapy thing. And I'm like, oh, I'm calmer, I'm gentler. And I walked right outside and got into a screaming match with a parking lot attendant about his fake Australian accent. I believed he was using a fake Australian accent. And I'm sitting there and he's yelling at me and I'm yelling at him. And then I'm pulling out, I'm like, oh God, what just happened? You just meditated and now you're screaming at some guy who's working in a parking lot. So therapy is very much, there's a lot of fun to be had and to mine from it, because it's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and it's human. And those are the stories that I like to share, because I want people to know, whatever you're thinking or going through, you're not the only person. So yeah, calculation-wise, I wish I had strategy about things. I don't care enough.
Besides therapy, you said that drugs have played a really big
I like
part
drugs, yeah.
into you becoming a kinder and gentler person. Can you talk a bit about which drugs, and did you bring any?
Yeah, I have cannabis on me all the time. I just handed out some edibles backstage, actually. I'm not joking. I think that, if you have the right mindset, it's not for everybody. I'm a big proponent of cannabis because it really sands down the edges for me. Personally, it was my gateway drug to meditation. It was the way for me to sit still. I was always running and spinning and doing a lot of things mediocre instead of elevating your game and doing 2 or 3 things very well. The quality of what I was doing, I wasn't impressed with anymore. So I wanted to slow down. And yes, I've done, I did a special on Netflix about doing ayahuasca. I've done lots of hallucinogenics, and I've documented it a lot because I just feel like we have such a ridiculous attitude about it in this country. And so the more people that can speak up about it, always the better.
But such an accepting attitude about alcohol, and obviously vodka is a big part of your, what would you call it? Your
journey?
Bit,
alcohol is a big part of my journey, vodka specifically.
Vodka specifically, I think you had a book, Are You There, Vodka?
Yeah, I did write a book, Are You There, Vodka? It's speechless. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller.
Sorry, I forgot.
That's okay, I just wanted to remind everybody.
But
I wrote 6 books that were #1 New York Times bestsellers. Just want to throw that out there.
She's also on tour, so you can also buy tickets for that if you're on a Chelsea buying spree. But how different is it going from being someone who's drinking a lot, talking about drinking a lot? It seems like the culture has shifted along with you on that as well, where it's used to be super acceptable to talk about being wasted all the time, and now we talk a lot about reaching a higher consciousness and doing psychedelics as a part of our personal journeys. Is alcohol out of the equation now for you?
No. I mean, it's out of the equation for me right now because I just got back from Mallorca and I had sangria 3 days for breakfast. So I was like, okay, when we get back, I'm going to do a 30-day no alcohol. So I think I'm on day 10 or 11 of that. So I'm just taking a little break. I would never, ever stop drinking altogether. I'm not a quitter. But alcohol is kind of an ugly, when you think about cannabis, something that grows from the earth, and you think about alcohol and what that does to people, I mean, it's pretty obvious that alcohol is the killer and cannabis is the plant. And I feel strongly about, like mushrooms and all the scientific data that they have about ketamine, about LSD, about, psilocybin, what that does in the right setting in a microdose way or in a guided way. It has so many healing properties, and and it's proven. So I have a very open mind about that, and I think it heals people.
And you're getting into the business now, right?
No, the cannabis business, yes, I have conversations going, but I have nothing to announce on that front. That has been an uphill climb.
Why was I told to ask about that?
I don't know. Probably because I love cannabis, maybe. I don't know.
But you did talk about it on Kara's podcast back in July, about getting into the business and fighting the mass incarceration of people of color. Can you talk a bit about what inspired you to do that and why a white woman is the spokesperson for this?
Well, all white people should be speaking up a little bit more about the injustices that we've placed on people of color, right? So I was going to start a brand, it fell through. I was going to launch a brand, it fell through. We've had a real tricky time in the cannabis space to find the right partners and put all the ducks in a row. But
is that because of regulations around things?
It's just because I think it's just such a nascent industry, It's kind of it's like a bunch of potheads that hook up with the CEO of Lululemon and try and start a company, and you're like, what is going on? It's going to take a minute, right? And it's also very male dominated, so I want only females. I want a female operating partner. I want a female. We need to, represent obviously in this space because this is a male dominated industry, like most things, which is okay. But now there's room for women. And with regard to the incarceration question, yes. I mean, you can't benefit, in my mind, profit off of something that has hundreds of thousands of people of color in jail for long-term prison sentences. I'm not going to do that without making sure that, you know, part of that goes to the right place, and to help those people with their legal fees, to help those people reintroduce them to society once they are released from prison. So that was the connection for that. If and when I do launch a brand, that will be definitely something that that it's also important to set that kind of example for anybody else moving into the industry.
I guess my question is, why profit from it at all? If part of the problem is that there is not space, that white people are crowding out people of color in this space, or are, you know, benefiting from their privilege in this space, why profit at all?
Why not? I mean, what do you mean, why not profit at all? Because it's it's something I care. I'm not supposed to profit from something that I care. I mean, that I'm interested in. You can still profit from something and help other people profit from it. I wouldn't say, oh, I can't do that, because I don't think, I mean, there's more that I can do by being active, in my mind, than not being active in that space.
Mm-hmm. And activism has been a big part of your life since the 2016 election.
Well,
correct?
Yes.
What happened then?
Yeah, there was a baboon elected to office, and I had a really hard time digesting that.
And I lost my glasses. Can you talk a bit about, it's fine, I don't need to see.
That's okay, I'll get them.
Thank you. Can you talk a bit about what that experience was like for you? Obviously, a lot of people in Hollywood, a lot of celebrities got very into activism, got very into politics around that time, just like the rest of the country did. Is that part of your journey to, you know, self-awakening that you've been on in the last couple of years?
I think, you know, it's interesting, because when Donald Trump was elected, I had something to place my anger at and on. You know, I looked at that, and it was just like, it just tore me apart. And that was what sent, you know, when I got so angry, it became, people were so annoyed with me, you know, because all I was doing was banging on about how I just couldn't believe I had to look at Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr.'s veneers for the next 4 years. I just couldn't believe it, or listen to Donald Trump speak. So I was very upset by that, but it got to a point where my anger became unmanageable, and I was doing my Netflix show at that time, and I just couldn't even focus on that. All I could focus on was the news and what was gonna happen, and when they were gonna drag him out of the White House in his underpants, you know, with his little toupee flying off and landing in the Rose Garden. That was my, you know, wishful dream or fantasy. And that kind of coalesced with, you know, that, because of that, I went into therapy, where I learned, no, you're not mad at him. Your anger that you know, and your, you know, my brother dying, all of these things that I never spoke about in any real meaningful way, end up bubbling up to the surface at some point, because if you leave grief unattended, it will find you. And, you know, it's better to sit through it than to put it away. So I did have a lot of anger, and I became very politically active, yes, and I always will be, and I was before, not to that degree. Mm-hmm. But I learned that, you know, that was just, you know, he was just a representation of so many different things. Mm-hmm. Do I care about Donald Trump? Not really. Do I care that he was the president? Yes. You know?
Was it hard to produce comedy about him, or in that era?
It was, yeah, because it just felt so dark. You know, it was so scary to think that, like, half the people in this country thought that was a good idea. And it made you realize, oh, wow, I am an elitist if I didn't think that was a possibility. I didn't think that was gonna happen. And I realized that's always what I wanted to be, was an elitist. I moved out here to be an elitist.
Congratulations.
You know? Thank you. I wanted a big house, and I wanted lots of money, and I wanted to make sure that I never had to depend on anybody ever again. So, you know, that comes with a price, where you really are not in touch with what's going on in the rest of the country.
You really didn't want to go back to Jersey.
No, I definitely don't want to go back to Jersey. Yeah, I know. But yeah, that was a very difficult time. It was a dark time. And I blame Donald Trump and his whole family.
But do you think that comedy suffered during that time in general?
Yeah, you know, well, he was very easy to make fun of. So there was
he though? I feel like it was so obvious that you really didn't need real life was funnier than the parodies.
Well, Alec Baldwin on SNL, it was pretty funny as Donald Trump.
You thought so?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought that was funny. And just his, you know, how dumb he was about regular things was funny. Mm-hmm. If it weren't so dark, you know, it could have been a lot funnier. Unfortunately, the odiousness of him kind of overtook the comedy of it, in my opinion. I certainly wasn't feeling very funny during that time. And I took it very seriously, and I got sucked into that news cycle, that 24-hour spin cycle, where you're like waiting for Rachel Maddow to say goodbye, to say hello to Lawrence O'Donnell. Well, then you turn it off for Lawrence O'Donnell, and then you turn it back on for Brian Williams. But no offense, Lawrence O'Donnell, love you. Anyway, he's probably sitting right here. And
he's waiting backstage.
He's coming on next. I'll introduce him. But yeah, and then I realized that was as unhealthy. That's an unhealthy way to be too, and that my anger and my happiness was at stake. Right? Like, that's what you do if you're sucked into something and you can't focus on anything else. And so that's kind of what drove me into wanting to get to a therapist, get my shit sorted out, and start to come from a more genuine, deeper place.
Are you happier now?
Yeah.
So are you grateful to Donald Trump for that?
No, I'm not really grateful to Donald Trump for anything. No, I mean, I would have skipped his presidency for me to just still be a bitch.
So your kinder, gentler persona comes at a time when people are touchier about speech and what you're allowed to say than ever. How is it frightening at all to go on stage trying to be funny and trying to talk honestly, and concerned that you might somehow fuck up?
Well,
have to apologize.
I don't really worry about that. I mean,
but you've had to apologize before for things that you've said.
Yeah. I have no problem apologizing for things now. Before therapy, I would never apologize for anything. Never. I was too prideful. I had such an ego. Now I'm just like, yeah, if you hurt someone's feelings, you have to say you're sorry. You don't know more than somebody else's feelings. You can't defend that. If somebody's upset with you or you did something insensitive, the only way to be is like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. I don't want to do that. I'm not here to hurt people, except for Lawrence O'Donnell.
He's here to hurt people.
But yeah, he is here. He's a secret killer. I think, it is, I called my special evolution because it is an evolution. That's how I think anyone can relate to growing, right? You become different, you change, I hate to say more mature. I always never wanted to be mature, but I am 46 years old, so at a certain point, you have to be mature. But no, do I fear that I'm going to say the wrong thing? No, I don't fear that I'm going to say the wrong thing. I know enough of what not to say.
I feel like that must require a lot of faith in your audience, that they're not going to interpret you uncharitably.
Well, I have a lot of faith in myself that I'm not going to do something that bad.
But when you said things in the past that you had to apologize for, were you apologizing then because you had hurt people's feelings, or were you genuinely misguided in what you believed was okay at the time?
Both, I think, both. It depends on the situation, but if somebody brings to your attention, first of all, if someone's feelings are really hurt, how do you that is bothersome, but also you can be and misguided. You just have a different set of ideas, and you think you get away with certain things, or you say things that you think are okay because you don't have the experience of what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So you're referencing something you have no experience with. It's like a white person talking about whether or not they think racism exists. It's not up to us to decide if racism exists. Mm-hmm. You ask a person of color, and they tell you, and that's your information.
Well, I think we're going to turn this over to the audience for some questions.
I love audience questions.
And I can't stress enough that this is for questions, not comments.
Have there been a lot of unquestionable questions?
Any Q&A, I feel like someone comes up and says, I have a comment on a question. It's like, well, that's not what we're here for.
Well, it doesn't seem, does anyone have any questions?
No.
Paul? Oh, hi.
Tammy.
Hi. Hi up here.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I'm ready. My question is, now that you've had so much self-discovery, I wonder if you and your therapist have figured anything out about how to save democracy or more trust in media institutions, not necessarily bringing the country together, but just that that everything's on the up and up and there's not some evil person behind the scenes manipulating institutions, government, politics, media.
No, my psychiatrist and I have not discovered what the answer
Can
is.
you get to that, please?
I know,
Now
I know.
that you're resolved.
I've taken a little break from therapy, but as soon as I get back, I will bring that to his attention. Yeah. I'll open with, what are we going to do about democracy? Yeah. He hated when I talked about politics, so he wasn't as tuned in, dialed in as I was at the time.
Well, but you're a public figure and people follow what you say, and you have an impact on the audience here today. So maybe there's something you can do. I'm not saying run for office.
No.
Are you running?
No, I could never survive on that salary, so I wouldn't. Thank you for your question.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Hi, Alex Enchin.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm in the psychedelic medicine space, and I love the way you talk about drugs and specifically the guided psychedelic journeys. And I've watched your ayahuasca episode, back 5 years ago or so, and just wondering, when you look back on that experience and some of the guided journeys, like, what have you learned and what's stuck with you, like, over the long haul?
I think for psychedelics, I think you have to really have a great headspace, right? You have to be open-minded when people are operating out of fear. Your experience with drugs, any sort of psychedelic, can be a reflection of that. So you really have to go in knowing this is going to be a positive experience. And I always have that feeling about any drug I do. I'm like, all right, you do the drug does not do you, right? You're in charge. So with ayahuasca specifically, people do that a lot, right? They go back and back. I don't know that I ever need to do that again. There's vomiting involved, and it's the whole thing. We went to Peru. I went to Peru twice in 1 year, and I just saw so many people that go there and stay there for those kinds of journeys, and then it becomes a lifestyle instead of an aid. So I think when you're thinking about these things, they're incremental in your life, and it's not you don't look at it as like a long-term usage thing. Microdosing now with psilocybin, yeah, you can do that, and you can be on a rotation of 3 days on, 3 days off, or whatever you decide you want your protocol to be. But I think with heavier stuff like ayahuasca, 5-DMEOT, ketamine, things like that, you kind of have to have a goal in mind and a beginning and a middle and an end time, because otherwise it becomes your lifestyle. And then it's like being in psychoanalysis for 8 years. Like, I want to go to therapy and knock it out and find out what's wrong with me, and then I'm done for this period of time. I don't want to sit on someone's sofa for 3 times a week for 8 years. That's not a good use of my time.
How do you actually juxtapose psychedelic therapy versus talk therapy?
No, I've never done psychedelic therapy.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I've only done it, recreationally. So, but no, I've read a lot about it, but no, I have never done that.
Cool. If you're interested, I'm happy to fill you in on.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And where to go.
Yeah, great, I love it.
Cool. Thank you.
Have
Thanks.
you ever had a bad trip?
No, I've never had a bad trip, no.
Really?
Yeah. And I did a lot of acid when I was in high school. So I did. I took my SATs when I was on acid, which explains why I didn't go to college. But I've never.
The quality of acid improved?
Well, I don't really do it acid right now, so I don't know. I'm sure it has. I'm sure it's not like going to the Limelight in New York City where you get a tab and you're like, off your rocker for 8 hours. I think it's a little bit more sophisticated now, and especially in any sort of clinical trial or whatever. I'm sure they know what they're doing. Yeah.
They seem fine.
Yeah. Have you
other
ever done acid?
No.
Oh.
I feel like I don't know. I don't hear about it much.
Yeah, you don't hear about acid very much, but there's a lot. I was just in Spain, and they were microdosing LSD there. They were microdosing psilocybin. You could buy it anywhere.
And you microdose mushrooms, right?
Yeah. I take mushrooms a lot. I love that.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Karen, and I don't take mushrooms a lot. So.
You look familiar. Have we met before?
Yeah, we have at a charity thing. Hi, nice to see
great.
you. So I run a company that manages risk, and I brought therapy into my business. I have 1,300 employees, and I'm a big advocate of therapy. I'm very open about my relationship with my therapist. I got my board was into the therapy, and I got a range of responses from kind of judgy to what the fuck am I listening to this for, to wow, that really helped us. And I'm just wondering, as you, and I did it like you, just I didn't really care what people said. I just thought it would be useful for me and for them, and it's worked out pretty well. when you decided to go public, is it just you telling your story again? Because I know you don't care what people say, or have you, the range of responses you've gotten, and do you think it's helpful to sort of make this tool known to people in a way that's not really preachy? You get the gist of the question?
The therapy or the drugs?
The therapy.
Or the combination?
The therapy.
The therapy,
really.
yeah. I
Because
think
the vulnerability and all the things you talk about.
Well, and especially with me, like people had a perception of me that I was just like, you know, like I don't give a shit about anything, and that's not true. I care about some things, and you know, and that I'm just this type of person. So for me to have that, to have for therapy to have had that kind of impact on me was worth sharing in my view, because I just thought, oh, how many people like me are stuck with something that happened that they just could never talk about? How many people would benefit from this, knowing that like me, who people think is so tough and all of these things, is also, you know, has her heart broken inside, and there's a little girl version of me that is really still broken. You know, how meaningful is that to people to hear that? And so I think it's always beneficial to talk about anything that's taboo in our culture, because that's our problem, is that everybody's so repressed. You know, everybody just needs to loosen the fuck up a little bit.
And have you got mostly positive feedback from that opening up?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. I've gotten a lot of beautiful stories from people about what the book meant to them and how they realized, oh, something had happened to them as a child that they were never, you know, when you're a little kid, and you know this, obviously you're a therapist, but something happens to you, you can get stuck at that age. And if something traumatic happens, my brother walked out the door and said to me, I will never leave you with these people, talking about my parents. You know, he said, I'll never leave you. And he was like the oldest of 6, I was the youngest of 6. We were bookends. And so when he left, and he was in a terrible hiking accident 72 hours later and never came home. And to a little 9-year-old girl, that is rejection, even though it's not what it is, it's an accident, it feels like rejection. And if you don't tend to that and work through that, you end up being a 9-year-old little girl when you're 40 years old about a lot of things regarding men and abandonment and all of the things. So that's not a whole person. And anyone who knows me, and even the public, has probably noticed a major difference in the way that I am, because it changes you, you know, to deal with your grief and to be open with somebody and to cry. It just changes you, and it heals you. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for the story.
Well, thanks for the work you do.
One last question, following up on that question. Have people been accepting of your evolution?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I don't know. Maybe some of my friendships got a little tricky after I went to therapy.
I went publicly, but you mean personally? People
Yeah,
bristle
personally,
at-
I think sometimes when you get healthy, some people don't like that.
Right.
I've definitely felt that vibe.
Have you like cut people out of your life who are not?
Oh yeah, I cut people out of my life all the time. I have no problem with that. Yeah, I mean, I have like new rules and boundaries in place. I didn't have that before, but yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
But when you become famous for being one way and then you become radically different, it seems to me that your fan base might change, or that.
Yeah, I'm sure my therapy talk annoyed plenty of people, but I'm sure it also brought in the kind of people that I'm interested in having, you know, as fans, or the people that I'm interested in engaging with. I'm not going to, again, pretend that I'm not doing something or quiet down about something just because people find it irksome. You know, that happened a lot when I got political. People got really upset. Stop talking about politics. My manager would be like, you're ruining your career. I'm like, you think I give a shit about my career right now? Like, the whole world is on fire. But, you know, you do pay the price for those kinds of things, but I don't know. Do I want to live a life of integrity and be honest? Do I want to worry about how people are going to perceive me? You know, I mean, I would like to be able to be brave and stand up for something when I see something. I want to be that type of person that makes other people believe that they can stand up and be brave too. So that's more important to me really than anything else.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.